Years and years into it, we realized that we were running ourselves ragged. We had no structure of the organization. We had no accountabilities. It was just like, you do this, I'm going to do that, and we're just going to run around like our heads cut off. We got more organized and we said, all right, we hired a coach. He's like, you guys are crazy. I don't know what you're doing. And he really set us straight on a lot of things. And one of the first things we did is identify who's responsible for what in the organization and then fill in the seats that need to be filled in. And then also figure out who's doing what that they're bad at and make sure they're not doing that anymore. For the last couple of years, I didn't have to go into a kitchen and actually like do anything. I could go and like observe, but I'd have to like go and fill in a shift ever, which was kind of nice.
There's a difference between a dream chaser and a dream catcher. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Dream Catchers podcast. I'm your host, Jerome, and I've got another amazing guest this week. I've got Daniel Hack. He's up in the Baltimore area, outside in Columbia, Maryland. Daniel and I met in Boston. He's part of this really cool group called Return of the Mastermind that you had to go through some pretty strenuous processes to get to the place where you could actually attend that event. And we'll probably unpack that as we go through the episode. But with that said, Daniel, man, so good to see you. Thank you for jumping on with me today.
I'm very excited to be here with you today. We had such a good conversation at the event a couple weeks ago that I wanted to jump in this and have a little bit longer of a conversation.
Yeah, man. So I like to open up these shows with, so you had an exit.
Yeah. I had an exit. What do you want to know about?
Well, I just want to establish that you had one because a lot of people spend a lot of time in business and they get confused about whether or not their relationship with their business is going to exit. And it's a fact that 100% of business owners exit their business. The question is, do you want to decide how you exit or do you want someone else to decide for you? And I believe that the best exits, the ones where people exit to excellence, come when they decide. Um, your your transparency and your vulnerability in a lot of the conversations we've had up until this point have been refreshing because I see a lot of founders pretend that everything was perfect and everything is okay, and they act as if nothing phased them while they were going through what is a very rigorous process for a lot of folks. And so it's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the show. So let's not go to the end or the beginning of the new thing. Let's go back. So were you ever in corporate? Like, did you have a job as like, are you an employee at one point?
Yeah, I mean, technically, when I was in college, I worked at like a bank, and then I worked for like a Fortune 500 services company, but they were like not real careers. I was a low level person. It was more about learning how being the cog in the machine, how that kind of works and what that's like. So it was that's more of like more eye opening to realize what I wanted to do or not wanted to do with my life.
And so I imagine you started something in your dorm room. How did you get to the place where you started a business that you were able to exit from?
Yeah, so basically, the quick story, I guess, is that my I was in my college fraternity, and my eventual business partner and I were fraternity brothers, and we were tasked with renovating our fraternity kitchen. So we did the renovation, and we hired like the staff for the facility, and we're doing this like unpaid like volunteer time, and we were like, this kind of stinks. There's like not it's not like it's not enjoyable to be a student and to be like in your early 20s and working on running a food service for a bunch of fraternity guys. So we decided maybe it was a business model there, and so we just kind of bootstrapped it ourselves, where we eventually started doing food for other houses on campus and then other campuses in the state. And then eventually we got like crazy and we're like, all right, let's like get in the car and start like knocking on fraternity and sorority house doors around the country. And like our first year in business, we spent like 8 weeks together in a car, like literally we didn't leave each other's side at all for those 8 weeks. It was a really interesting experience to spend that much time with another person. Um, we survived, which was important. And then we kind of just grew it from there. And as we matured, we there's a lot, it's a lot of struggles of running a business. It's not all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. And eventually, we also wanted to branch outside that clientele. We realized that as much as we liked working with the college students, there's a lot of headaches there as well. Um, and so we started looking more into doing some more corporate side of things like cafeterias, and like small schools, things like that. So we wanted to branch out a little bit. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like the quick down and dirty, that's condensing many, many years into, 2 minutes. So
Well, I mean, 8 weeks was condensed to 1 sentence, and so what's fascinating for me is 2 guys getting along for 8 weeks in a car. Like, how I guess that's when you guys knew you were gonna, like, actually be partners, but how did you know that you could go to other campuses and offer them the services that you were doing on yours?
so I will give my partner a lot of credit on this. He was very much like, it wasn't he didn't seem like he was afraid to knock on a door. Like, he didn't bother him. So he was much more of that outgoing person. So he was definitely more the sales focused, and I was just there for backup on the most of those meetings. So it worked out well that he would be most of the front guy. I would try to be more the back guy on that kind of stuff. But we just realized that it's just like anything. If you just get in front of people and talk to them, you can sell yourself and really just kind of connect with them and have a conversation. It's not difficult to sell something if you can do that one-on-one time. So it was
Mm.
just, we're trying to cut out the middleman. We realized if we're making phone calls or sending letters, no one's gonna respond to that. You have to like just show up unannounced and say, "Hey, who's in charge of your food? Let's talk." And people will respond to that.
So were you talking to fraternity members of the same fraternity at different campuses? Is that how you spread it?
So we spread it a couple different ways. So what we try to do is go to a campus and then find one location and then try to like branch out from that first spot we get in on campus. And the other way is we try to make partnerships with like national organizations and try to filter it down that way. So we build a relationship with one organization. We say, hey, like, what are the campuses you guys have problems at? We can go there and try to help you out. So that was kind of the two different ways to go about it. There's a lot of the fraternity and sorority world is very interesting, the way that it's run both on a national and a local level. So there's a lot of, depending on the organization, there's a lot of people who have their say in the matter of what's going to happen, between like the board that actually runs the facilities. There's a lot of alumni usually involved in some organizations, but then there's some that are not. It's all the students. So it's kind of been interesting, like how different a lot of them are and how different the sales cycle was for each of them and the service side of it too. So
Now, I imagine this is a pretty big step on your journey when you move from doing fraternity and sorority houses to your first university.
so definitely didn't jump up to like a university. I want to make sure it's not, I don't want to oversell myself too much. So we did that later on in the business. This is like year 10. So we have been going along with doing the Greek life for a long time. And then it was actually right before COVID is where we started getting into doing more of the corporate style stuff. And it was nice because they're more professional. So they have, when you do a bid for a like a K through 12 school, they're much, they actually have like real people who have like real positions. When you send them an email, they respond to you, and it's not some student who's 19 years old and he's, most of his time is spent, studying or drinking. So that's, it's a little more, it's a lot more professional. Um, and so our first kind of contract beyond that was for it was for like a state, it was the first state institution. So we had actually had to go. It was very interesting. It was learning for us because we had to go and like we bid like against other people. Like, normally we do the fraternities, like we might be bidding against other organizations, but it's not like we're all there at the same time doing like the discovery meeting where we're like actually seeing the facility, but it's like all the other vendors there too. So that was kind of eye-opening for me because I'm not used to that in that world. And then it was a new kind of experience. I like trying new things out. I like the novel. I like doing new stuff. So yeah.
So when that happened though, like did they count your previous experience as relevant experience?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. The at the end of the day, the type of food service we're doing by being like institutional, doing like cafeterias, it's all very similar. Like doing lunch for like a K through 12 school, it's very similar doing lunch for a fraternity, very similar doing lunch like a corporate cafeteria. So it all kind of translates. And a lot of the food trends also kind of translate into what's popular now. It's popular for everybody. It's not just, it's not like everyone's eating different kinds of food. When avocado toast got big a couple of years ago, like everybody wanted it. It didn't matter if you were, some big fancy institution or some small, little thing. They all thought it was trendy, so they wanted it. I don't even know what's trendy these days. Now that I'm out of the food service game, I'm really behind the times on everything.
Well, I don't know. I was talking to a health coach, and he's basically said, I mean, you eat the same 4 meals or same 4 meats. It's
Yeah,
probably same 4 vegetables and the same 4 starches throughout the week. And it's really
yeah.
interesting when you start talking to folks about a nutrition plan, how they get apprehensive about, oh, I can't have this and I can't have that. But the 80% of their diet on a week to week basis is what is leading to the health that they have, and small tweaks in that 80% can make a huge difference in
Mhm.
your overall health. So
Oh yeah. It's also nice working with the college kids because they can eat like anything and stay in shape. So, as we I reached that age where that doesn't work anymore for me. But when they're, 19, 20, you could eat whatever you want. And I don't know how they do it.
yeah, well, I think the metabolism's high and they're moving around a lot too.
Yeah, it's
So you said you went on the road for 8 weeks.
yeah. So
Somebody
we
had to run the business while you were gone, right?
so we just did it ourselves remote. I mean, those were the early days. Those early days, I feel like you do crazy things. You don't even realize how crazy they are until after you look back on them. So we just had our people in place and we said, like, we're gonna be gone for a few weeks, like we'll call you every day. We didn't have a ton of accounts at that point, so we could kind of we could just do it. It made sense. And we did the road trip was basically we started in Phoenix, Arizona. We drove cross country. We hit up like all of the South, like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and we were driving all the way up to like Penn State, and then kind of cutting back down around. So we hit like a lot of schools at that time, and we were kind of crazy too. We were young, back then, so we'd door knock all day, and then we get in the car and like drive to the next location, and then just sleep, for a couple hours and get up and do it all over again. And I was doing that, basically 7 days a week.
I what? That's phenomenal. Like, I imagine there's probably some stories that nobody wants to tell. But with that said, uh when did you guys what role was your first key hire?
My first key hire, so would have been an executive chef. So that was we were we were running it ourselves on the actual operation, like the management side of things. So we were doing everything ourselves when it came to payroll, all the state different entities we had to deal with. So we're handling all that, and we basically focus on just having like ground staff, and they would answer to us directly. Eventually, we brought on a guy who was in our office who like did all of our food ordering. So we did all of our all of our food ordering was in house. So our chefs, we would have to control our budgets. We'd have them funnel their orders through us, and then we would make sure that they were like within what they should be spending per day or per week. Um, that model was too restrictive, though. We should have put that kind of barriers on our people. We just were hiring the wrong employees at that point because we didn't have the reins that tight. But that was one of our key people because it was like our first time we had somebody actually in an office somewhere where I could like see him like day to day. Because most of the staff was remote. I used to deal with people in basically every time zone across the country. We had kitchens in, like I said, Atlanta, all the way up near Washington State University, so up in like the Pullman area. So I mean, I was dealing with people literally across the country, and it was difficult when there an issue would have come up. I'd have to go on an airplane to go fix it. It wasn't like necessarily have someone there who could fix it. I'd have a head chef who could fix something. That's not really a problem solver or a manager. I'd so it would those were the real nightmares of dealing with having to put out fires myself by going to some place for 3 weeks and like living there and try to fix, some issues whenever they come up. Um, I don't miss that.
Well, so the executive chef was at, let's call it HQ with the two of you, and then you had staff at the different campuses serving the folks that were in the fraternity or sorority hall, right?
So eventually what we did is we hired this is like years and years into it. We realized that we were running ourselves ragged. We had no structure of the organization. We had no like accountabilities. It was just like, you do this, I'm gonna do that, and we're just gonna run around like our heads cut off. And so we got more organized and we said, all right, we hired a coach. Um, he's like, you guys are crazy. I don't know what you're doing. And he really set us straight on a lot of things. And one of the first things we did is identify who's responsible for what in the organization, and then fill in the seats that need to be filled in, and then also figure out who's doing what that they're bad at and make sure they're not doing that anymore. So we quickly hired like our top lieutenant. She was like the best. She was um I don't know how to describe her. She basically was like a jack of all trades. She was customer service. She'd make phone calls. She was like an admin, but better than that. I mean, she was on our leadership team. I mean, she was just wicked smart, and I really loved working with her. And then eventually we hired then a like a food service manager who was like over everybody on the whole country, and that person was more handling the day-to-day stuff, so I didn't have to handle anymore, and then they can go travel when there was a big problem. So I realized I could outsource that to somebody else and not have to go get on an airplane, and they could get on the airplane instead. It was a lot nicer. So those were the tail end years. It got a lot better when like I said, I learned how to delegate. So that was nice.
So did you ever get out of the day-to-day operation?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I for the last couple of years, I didn't have to go into a kitchen and actually like do anything. I could go and like observe, but I'd have to like go and fill in a shift ever, which was kind of nice. So I mean, like I said, those early years, you'll do whatever it takes. I mean, like we need someone to cook. We don't if someone quit, like I guess I'm cooking for a couple of weeks. And I'm still running the business. I mean, those were some crazy times. So yeah, there was a good like 2 months where I was getting up every day at like 5 in the morning to drive. I was living up in New England, so I was driving into Boston every day for a client because we had a chef who had a workman's comp issue, so he like hurt his leg, and we were going to come back, but we had to fill in for that time. So I said, all right, I'll fill in for him for the few weeks, and that was awful to get up every day. And like I said, I was on the phone like with customers and with employees while I was like cooking in that kitchen, trying to like solve their problems too. So that was nuts.
So, I mean, are you a chef? Like, how did this happen?
So so the the before we started the business, I had worked in restaurants before. I'm not like a classically trained great, chef. But I can make the food for a lot of people, and it's halfway decent. And so then the the year before we officially started the business, when we realized that this was a viable business, I actually decided to become the chef for my fraternity and do the job for a year. And that way I could get into the nuts and bolts of it from the side of actually doing it and get paid for it. And it was a miserable experience. Like I don't recommend this to anyone. Because I'm basically working for my friends. And they were not like kind about it whatsoever. um, but it gave me the opportunity to kind of like really get into that mindset and really see what the job was all about. And that way I wasn't going to ask anybody to do something that I didn't do or couldn't do in the past. So I kind of knew what kind of skills I needed. So that was, yeah, like I said, it's funny because people think I like when I tell my food service experience, they think I'm like this, went to school to like some fancy culinary school and I have all these, like, that's not at all. Like I just learned it by doing it.
Wow. I was thinking Michelin star chef, and we know all the things, and you got the coat with the B on the sleeve and all of the other fancy
No,
stuff.
I
So,
I've got my coats upstairs, but nothing. They're not like legitimately that fancy at all. So it's not like I do not claim to be a chef whatsoever. I meet like real people who are in that industry. I feel like that's a whole different animal than what I had to do.
Wow. So, what was the most important step in getting out of the day to day?
The biggest step was hiring my coach. I mean, he changed my life. So I was a member of the Entrepreneurs Organization for many years, and that was it's a. I mean, I'm not sure if people are familiar with it, but it's a peer-to-peer network where we come together monthly in like small groups and we talk about what's affecting our business and our personal lives. And we get kind of deep into like what's going on. And through that organization, I met my eventual coach, Eric, and he revolutionized like everything for me because he really opened my eyes to like what we're doing wrong. It was for that many years together, my partner and I, we got along really well, but we would have problems where we get into like stalemates and we couldn't get past them. And he helped us kind of figure out some of those like impasses and helped us see things from like a 30,000 foot view because sometimes you get stuck in the weeds with each other and it's tough.
So he coached you as a team, or you had him, and then Eric or your
So
partner had to do their own thing?
so the way he worked with us is that he helped us do like our strategy sessions every quarter. So that he come in with the whole leadership team. And so we'd sit down for a full whole day where we like figure out, we map out our next 90 days, our goals and everything and work on that. And then on the side, my partner and I would get on the phone with him for like 2 hours every other week. And we would hash out like any other like underlying issues that are going on in the business, and that was more of like an accountability call for ourselves to make sure that we're keeping ourselves accountable to each other. And we had that third person who could be like, hey, this is what you guys said you're going to do or not do. And it was a little less like infighting between the two of us.
I think that forced communication is some of the most valuable work you can do in the business and on the
Yeah.
business as well. So, did you guys ever establish a board?
Not like we were a C corp, which is a whole nother thing. We didn't know what we were doing when we filed our business. We just like went down to the office and they're like, what do you want to be? And we're like, I don't know, a corporation. And we didn't, no strategy on the taxes on that. We just said, let's just do it. And so we were C corp for all these years. And every time we have people different professionals, like accountants and things, they're like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is nuts. And then eventually it came full circle that helped us in the long run. But it was just kind of funny that we didn't know what we were doing. So we never had like an official board. But we'd have to do like board meetings where you have to do your minutes and things like that for compliance with the states. Those were always kind of interesting, but they weren't like real meetings in the sense where you're actually having conversations. It's all compliance with the government.
Got it. Got it. So, you were above the business where you weren't in the kitchen, but you were basically running it and owning it.
Yeah.
Um, and then you get to the place where you're ready to exit. And so, did you exit by selling it, giving it away, or just closing it?
I sold it.
Okay.
Um, so coming out of COVID, my partner and I had very different visions for where we wanted the business to go and how we wanted to kind of ramp back up out of that. And even with using like our coach and having these long conversations, it was a point where we had to separate. It was and I pushed the issue a little bit with him. I think he would have ridden it out for a couple more years together, and I think we would have just stuck it out. And I just wasn't really looking to do that. And so I said, listen, this is the point where like if we end now, we could end amicably, and if we keep it going, it'll definitely end where like one of us, hates the other one for the rest of our lives. I've seen that enough times with some partners and people who go into business as friends, and so it wasn't an easy process. I don't want to make it sound like we just came together one day and shook hands and here you go, here's your business. I gave him the keys and he gave me a check, and it was beautiful like that. I mean, it was drawn out. It was definitely like trying at times, but eventually he did buy me out.
Wow. So, what was your first experience with someone selling a business? Because I know a lot of people out there don't even know that you can sell a business or sell your ownership in a business.
Yeah. It was kind of nice so being part of the EO group I was mentioning, is that we would come together and discuss our different businesses. So you'd be in a forum of like 9 different entities, and then we'd share our different experiences of businesses. And so, and it wouldn't all be the same industry. So we'd have people who are just all over the map. And a lot of those people in that organization, I had seen and talked to them about what their exits were like. And we were more focused at that point on the tactical. We didn't get as deep into the emotional side of it. Um, it was, it's difficult to talk about a little bit because it's not, we have a lot of rules in that organization about being very like what's said here stays here. So it's I want to make it very clear that like whenever I'm talking about what those kind of conversations were, it's more of a I want to make sure it's very respectful of that kind of vulnerability we have with each other. So I will say that like I got a lot of good information out of them, but we didn't have the conversations as much about like what's next after the exit and what does that look like. And I'm sure that people in that group have gone through that, and maybe that wasn't discussed as much as it should have been. But it was definitely more about like seeing people trying to sell, and then it was more about like how much can I get for it? What's the valuation? Like what's the multiple? It's all it's the numbers. That's all everyone really cares about. They're getting really excited about that. People want to talk about like, is now the right time to sell? If I wait 5 more years, what's that going to look like? What's the economy going to do? And it's this like long conversation of like trying to tell the future, and like nobody really knows. And I find it kind of fun to hear other people talk about it, because I'm like, you don't really know. If you sold right now, you might be at the peak of the market and it might be the best time to sell that business, but it might not. And it's kind of dumb luck a little bit. Like I know people who have sold businesses and they truly sold at the top of the market and they got the luckiest they'll ever. I mean, there's windfalls like I've never couldn't believe people have ever seen. And then I've seen other people, they're like, I waited a little too long and I didn't sell and I thought it'd be worth it. And the industry kind of collapsed and I got screwed and it just didn't work out. It's there's no perfect answer of what that looks like. I mean, the number one thing, in my opinion, is just try to get as much cash as possible, like a down payment. I believe in taking as much off the table into your pocket. I don't want to stretch payments out. I don't want to, that's how I look at it. But I don't know. I just find the whole thing very much like fuzzy, uh, like crystal ball, like what's going to happen. It's not really what the world is. So I don't know if that's an experience you've seen with other people who've sold, but
Oh, it's 100% art. It's not science, it's
yeah.
art. But you said something that I found really fascinating. You said basically, I was just focused on the tactics, like the mechanics of selling my business. I didn't really focus on the emotional unravel or the founder's exit paradox, as we call it. And do you think, because I think most founders, like they think they just need to know how to sell their business. Um, they need the mechanics. Do you think that's a mistake? Should there be more focus on things outside of just the mechanics of selling the business?
Yes, 100%. Um, if I could go back and do it all, it's tough because I say if I can go back and do it all over again, I have knowledge now today that would make it easier. So it wouldn't go the same way. But I didn't know what was next for me after I sold, and that created a big gap in my life. I mean, my entire identity was owning a company. When I went to meet people, they'd say like, who are you? And I'd be like, oh, hey, I'm Dan. I own a business. And then I get to tell them all about it. And as I was going through the process of selling, it took us some time to go through the due diligence and actually like finalize the deal. And I got out of the day to day, and I wasn't like working day to day anymore. And so it hadn't sold yet, and I wasn't working, and it was a weird, nebulous time in my life where I felt very like lost, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And it was also weird because the deal hadn't gone through yet. So like there was still a chance we didn't actually sell, but I wasn't involved in the business anymore. That was about 9 months, and it was a crazy 9 months. Um, yeah.
What did that feel like? What did it feel like to not have to be in the business and not really have your next figured out?
So like the first day, basically, when it was like settled that I was not going to be working day to day, I was so happy. I got to like sleep in that day.
Hey guys, as you might know, a very small percentage of the people who actually listen to this podcast are subscribers. So do us a favor, subscribe. In fact, we did some analytics and we found out that only 25% of the people who listen are subscribers. And our goal is to get that to about 75% over the next 3 months. So do us a favor, hit the subscribe button so you get notified when our new episodes come. We plan to bring immense value to you guys going forward as we continue to improve the content that we create at Dreamcatcher. Your dreams should be real. Let's get back to the show.
I was like free as a bird, and life couldn't get any better. You don't have to worry about their phone ringing at 3 in the morning because somebody's sick and they can't come in to work tomorrow, because I wasn't worried about it. And that lasted not forever, but it lasted a little bit longer than I think a lot of people experience. I heard a lot of people talk about that it's an overnight thing. It's one day and it's gone. But it kind of felt nice to have that. And I felt very free because I felt there's a lot of options in front of me. But there was like too many options almost, where like I said I could do anything now. I could reinvent myself. And I try to jump into too many things and do everything under the sun all at once, and that is a recipe for disaster. Don't, yeah, that I wish I would have just had a better idea of what I wanted to do next, and then had a better plan how to get there. And I didn't think about it. I was living day to day. And it was kind of funny because on the business for all these years, I had, set my quarterly goals, and I had these like long-term, like, here's where we're going to be at in 10 years, here's where we're going to be at in 3 years. And I had done some of that on my personal side as well. Like I would say to myself, like, I want to have, a family with this date. I want to have, this house built. I want to have, this car bought. I want to have these different things. And I kind of had those goals set out, but everything actually tied back to the business still, even those other personal goals. And so even though I was used to setting these long-term plans, when it all kind of disappeared, everything disappeared. And I didn't even have that other side to like hold on to and keep that routine. And I definitely didn't keep the routine. I mean, I was waking up every day at like, 5:30 in the morning. I go to the gym every morning. I was living this like very regimental life when I had my business. And then that slipped big time when I got out of the business, which it shouldn't have, but it did. It's kind of weird how they go hand in hand like that.
Well, I think one drives the other. You want to get something done, give it to a busy person. If a person who
Mhm.
doesn't have much going on really doesn't have much going on, and
Yeah.
they probably won't get much done either. So, I think you kind of described the exit paradox and what a lot of people would consider to be a crisis of loss of identity and so on. Um, that didn't set in probably until after the check or the wire. So,
So it did set in before that actually. Yeah. So it was like in the fall where that's when it was decided I was going to step away. And then that winter, that was my lowest point. And after that, with like the sale. So I was at a retreat with some business owners, and they were talking about like our long-term plans. And it was the same thing. They're talking about these big goals they have, and I didn't have anything. And I felt very like inadequate. And I was said, well, I need to now rebuild another business to be as successful as this last one, because that seems like the thing that these guys would have done, and I should be on the same level as them. And like, what can I make happen? Um, and then that spirals into like the worst panic attack I've ever experienced my entire life. That lasted for like 4 days. And that
Mhm.
was that, like I said, that was the lowest point. That was when like I felt like I didn't know what was going on, what my direction was. I I came unglued on that one big time.
so how'd you get out of it?
Unfortunately, this was like I said, my lowest of lows. I ended up going to the hospital. It was that bad where I felt like I could not escape that spiral of panic and that anxiety. And I ended up checking myself into the hospital, and I had to get probably professional help for that. And I wish I didn't let it go that far. That was, like I said, a very humbling experience. And what's kind of what makes it so it's kind of interesting as well is that I'm still going through the process of selling the business. So like I'm having this spiral. I'm in the hospital, they take your phone away. I'm like they're they're taking, you're taken care of. You're on, you're getting, getting the help I need. But in the meantime, every night they give you your phone back for an hour to like call your friends and family. And I'm texting my business partner to like still negotiate the deal with him. And so like, I mean, it was just a wild, that was not recommended. To this day, like I never told him this story. Like he doesn't actually know this happened during the deal. Like I didn't want to, we were good friends and I would still have a decent relationship, but I didn't want to like have that as part of the negotiation that like like I've lost my stuff and I'm unhinged and I need medical treatment. I didn't want that. Would definitely be a leverage point that I didn't want to have with part of the negotiation. So it was difficult to have, to deal with that.
That low point, I mean, some people call it rock bottom. It's a rock top for some people, right?
Mm.
If you can get a bunch of money, you can like go out on the top. You can be a champion, and it's just such a deflating experience. So, I mean, did you know about the founder's exit paradox? Like, did you know that there was something that could be this detrimental and
I
uncomfortable
had
on the backside of it?
I had heard other business owners talk about like when they have their exit about having this a little bit like unmoored feeling, but most of what I've got out of them, it sounded like they just didn't know what to do. And it was more like restless and they talk about like having a non-compete. So they're like stuck from being able to get back in their own industry that they liked. And it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel part of their identity. It felt more like they're just bored almost. And then going through it, it was definitely not boredom. It was like I lost who I was, and I had to rebuild, what makes me me. So and I it was definitely not discussed as much as I think it should be with business owners who are either exiting like soon or even thinking about exiting. Like you said, everyone eventually exits, and it's either by choice or you're, hopefully by choice, but there's a lot of times where it happens to us. So you got to prepare for that.
Yeah. So what's crazy, and I don't know that it's crazy, but I'll call it crazy, is there were probably a lot of things that went really well with your exit. Would you mind sharing a couple of those with us?
I what did go well for us is that we didn't go through like a ton of the legal like back and forth negotiations. We just did it ourselves. We realized that I wasn't selling for some crazy number that like I'm not getting, billions of dollars for my business. And we realized that we just didn't want to like pay a ton of money to some valuation person and we didn't want to pay a bunch to the lawyers. We eventually had the lawyers, do the paperwork to make sure it's all on the up and up, but we didn't have them negotiate with each other. That was just a waste of money on both of our parts. We realized that we could just do it ourselves. We could have that conversation and figure out what matters to both of us and what our sticking points were. And so that part of it, I thought we did really well. I don't know if I recommend that to everybody or anybody, but I just felt we had a good relationship where we weren't trying to like stick it to each other and we could get through it with, amicably together and not have to rely on the professionals.
So it's funny that you bring this up because I see a lot of partnerships that just end worse than divorces. And so the fact that you two were able to come to a conclusion where you don't hate each other's guts is says a lot about who you two are as people.
So it's a weird place that we're in right now. We're not, we used to speak multiple times a day. I mean, we used to share an office. I mean, we would sit across from each other and there was no time apart. 8 weeks in the car is a long time. And since the sale, we have, texted here and there, but it's not that same relationship. I am thankful it's not that hateful relationship. I have seen that as well with people who are like never be in the same room again with that person. It's like the worst divorce of all time. And I actually recently got engaged and I invited him to the wedding. And he said yes. So he's gonna come. And hopefully, it'll all be good. And then I reach out to him once in a while. And he lives in New York now. He's in the city. So if I'm up there for like work, I'll reach out to him and say, hey, are you around? Do you want to grab lunch? And unfortunately, our schedules haven't aligned recently. But like I said, I am very thankful that we have still a relationship where we don't we're not bashing each other, or at least I'm not bashing him. Now he might hate me. I'm hoping that's not the case.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think anybody ever wants to be bashed, but the beauty of it, from my perspective, is when somebody steps off the ride, it can be really easy to come up with all the reasons why they're a bad person. They left me, they abandoned me, et cetera, et cetera. Like you can create a narrative that just isn't true in order to make it so that you have a villain to fight against.
And I thought about that. I might have been the villain in this situation because I was the one who wanted to get off the ride, and I was the one who kind of forced that. And I don't know for sure if he's actually okay with that. I've never had that conversation. I should reach out to him and actually ask him that directly, and maybe I will. I mean, I I don't feel like I was the bad person, and I definitely had other reasons that he might not have seen about why I need to get out of the business. And so I think we had different, we're going different directions in our lives. It was not something I think we could continue. And I hope that now that he's been on his own for a few years, that he realizes that it was for the best. And I'm hoping he's happy with the way, things have turned out, that he's, continued to run the business. It's still out there. It's still going strong. Everything I hear is that they're still running on all cylinders. So I'm happy that like I was able to leave and it didn't implode. I didn't want to leave something and then it collapsed the next day. That would look terrible for me too. So very thankful that he's still out there running.
Yeah, that would be bad. Oh, we want him to have plenty of success on the backside of the
Yes.
exit. So, what are you doing now? Because, you got your liquidity event, you got your time, you
Mhm.
went through the valley, and now you're on the other side of the valley. What's going on?
So it took me some time to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I had a lot of ideas, and I'm so thankful I didn't invest a ton of money into some of them because they were some bad ideas. So I know that happens to a lot of people where they'll start doing some crazy ventures, and I'm very thankful that I was very frugal. So any venture I wanted to do, I never spent more than a few like $100, not even like thousands. So I'm very thankful for that. Um, and as time went on, I ended up actually, I was at the ROM event, the previous one, and we had a speaker talk about finding our why. And I've done other work on that before. I had gone through the Simon Sinek, like find your why stuff, and I never was able to kind of capture like what my why was. And this session, it the speaker just clicked, and I discovered like what my why was. And that revolutionized how I looked at like life. And I started saying to myself, wow, like I actually do resonate with that. My why was to find clarity. Um, and so I looked into like what other kind of positions, like what kind of roles are good for someone who's got that drive. And one of the roles is consulting. And I had a consultant, like I said, that he changed my life, but I always felt it was very much like it was almost like a negative. I didn't I felt like I don't want to badmouth consultants because I am one, but I felt very much like that whole idea of like if you can you do and if you can't you teach, like, and I felt like that's not the case though, and I was very like down on it. I always had this negative thing in my mind, and I fell in love with it. I've been coaching businesses for over a year now, and I love working with them. I like teaching them the tools of how to run a better operation, how to be happier in the business, like how to increase revenue. I love the financial side of it too, because when I first started my business, I felt like there's a lot of things about running a financial part of your company that is hard, and that there's not really a good resource out there to learn all that. So you have to like learn trial by fire. And I like teaching that now to people and kind of like make sure that they understand what those concepts are. Um, and it's kind of funny, like how many times I'll sit down with a business owner and they'll like really quiet, like in a hushed voice, and they'll say, like, listen, I don't know what a controller is. And I've owned my business for 20 years. And I'm like, okay, I can teach you what that controller is. Like, that's not a problem. But it's like, it's rampant. It's not like a one. not like a one-time thing. It's all the time. These different people, they expect to know that answer, and no one's really shown them. And even when they Google stuff, it's not like giving them as good an answer as they really or should be getting for a lot of things. It's Google only goes so far. Um, ChatGPT as well only takes you so far. You have to little a little bit more to that heavy lift. So that's what I've been up to. I actually ended up going and then joining the guy who was my coach for all those years. I joined his firm, and I was hesitant at first about joining a firm with other people because I was on my own. I'm like, I'm unhireable. I've been working on my own too long, and no one can work. I can't work for anybody. And I realized that that's partially true. I think that's a lot of things people tell themselves to make them like feel good about where they're at. But in reality, you could go work for somebody. And I like his team. Like I said, I used them, and I said, you know what? I like all these people. They're all business owners or former business owners like myself. They're all people who have had exits or are close to exiting, and we have like these amazing conversations about business and about the dynamics of what it looks like. And I just love working with them. So I jumped in, and I've been very happy since then.
I am so happy that you found a way to give back on the backside of your exit, and in a way that initially you probably didn't think that you would. Because so many people are scared to try things based on their perception of a thing. Do
Mhm.
you know what flipped the switch for you and helped you get okay with not being the one that was doing, but the one that was guiding?
I It was part of finding my why is when I realized that by helping other people find that clarity, like it scratches that itch that's deep inside of you. I've got into the idea of the ikigai, the Japanese principle of finding your purpose, and I find that that does like fulfill my purpose, and I can get paid for it, and I'm happy with it, and I just get that satisfaction when I'm able to help someone to learn something and actually teach them on their level. That's the biggest thing. I worked with a client recently where it was like a multi-generational family, and they knew the business, but they didn't know the business of business. And I sat down with them, and I really it was like going to school where I like just taught them all these different concepts, and I just had fun doing it. And they were like eager to learn. That was the other thing. I I was worried that it was going to be a situation where I'm like forcing people to like learn information. It's like, and they would be like hesitant to have the conversation. But I found it was the opposite. I had these people who were like eager to make their lives and their businesses better. And I said, wow, I actually like working with these people. And it's one of my prerequisites is like, I don't want to work with someone I don't like. And that's important to me. And I think that a lot of businesses don't do that enough. They take clients because they pay the bills, but if they don't fulfill you or make you happy or then they're pain, like have them go somewhere else. Like you can find people you like to be with. That's an okay thing to do. I recommend it to everybody.
It is an okay thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, this is phenomenal. Your story is so inspiring, man. Like the things that you endured in order to build what you built, the way you've been able to what most people blow up, you've been able to retain and keep a relationship with somebody you consider a lifelong friend. Um, and just the adversity of fighting back from being in the low. Like my thing is, I just don't want people to be blindsided by the fact that the founder X's paradox is out there looming. I think, you might agree with this, having somebody help you on the front side so that you don't get low, and low in this case was like I had to check myself in, um, is probably money and time well spent if you know that you're going to exit. And again, 100% of business owners exit from their business. It's just a matter of how they exit. So it's just a great inspiration. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. Um, I love what you're doing to help folks. If they want to find out about more about how you're helping folks, where should they go?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best. I love connecting with more people. So it's just Daniel Heck. If you search for me, it's it's a big picture of me. I'm hard to miss. And yeah, feel free to connect with me, send me a message. I mean, I love meeting with new business owners, people who are coming up, people who are whatever stage they're at. I just like talking to people. So I'm happy to talk. I feel like not enough people reach out. I put this out all the time where I'm like, hey, like anybody want to chat with me? Give me a call, send me a message on LinkedIn. And people are always hesitant. And I'm like, you know what? Like people should do it more. So I recommend it to anybody, and not just me, anybody you hear speak, or if you're, at a seminar or you read a book that you like, reach out to the author, reach out to the speaker and talk, just say, hey, I really liked what you said. And you'd be surprised how much they respond to that kind of stuff. I mean, so yeah, anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, hit me up.
Wow. Daniel, you're a dream catcher, man. Um, and so we're gonna wrap this episode, y'all. To the listeners, your dreams should be real. We'll catch you on the next episode.